Welcome to this explainer. We're going to jump right in today and dismantle what is absolutely the biggest illusion in bulk liquid chemical logistics right now. If you're a logistics executive or mapping out global supply chains, you've definitely sat through those presentations where massive fleet scale is touted as the ultimate competitive edge. But what if we told you that relying on that scale is actually a trap? Let's get right to it and uncover why the traditional playbook is fundamentally flawed.
Let's talk about a massive number, 40,000. This represents the typical fleet size that industry keynotes and corporate strategy decks just obsess over. We see companies constantly bragging about managing 30, 40, or even 50,000 ISO tank containers. And the underlying assumption, it's always that physical scale automatically guarantees market dominance. But here's the hard truth. While fleet volume absolutely gives you operational capacity and drives top-line growth, it rarely protects your profit margins when market rates inevitably drop.
Which brings us to this cold, pragmatic reality. If you think your fleet is your greatest strategic strength, you are sitting on a commodity, not a strategy. The truth of the modern logistics market is that literally anyone with a checkbook can walk into a major leasing company, like Eurotainer or Trifleet, and secure 100 T11 standard chemical tanks by next week. Having a massive fleet just isn't a unique differentiator anymore. It's really just the price of entry into the game.
So how do we actually test the strategic weight of a massive physical fleet? We need a pragmatic, executive-level tool for this. We can ground our analysis in strategic management theory, specifically Barney's resource-based view, by applying the VRIO framework. VRIO asks 4 critical questions of any asset to figure out if it truly provides a sustainable competitive advantage. First, is it valuable? Does it help exploit opportunities? Second, is it rare? Third, is it inimitable? Meaning, is it highly difficult or costly for your rivals to copy? And finally, is the firm organized to capture its value? Let's take this framework and apply it directly to a massive fleet of standard ISO tank containers.
Applying VRIO brilliantly illustrates the complication here. A 40,000-unit fleet of standard T11 or T14 tanks is definitely valuable, right? You simply can't run global chemical logistics without tanks. And yes, it's well organized within your transport management systems. But is it rare? No. The massive market leasing capacity ensures that your competitors can scale up their physical fleets just as rapidly as you can. And is it inimitable? Absolutely not. Standard steel shells, valves, and frames are manufactured right off the shelf to universal international standards like IMDG and UN codes. Because these tanks are neither rare nor inimitable, relying on fleet size alone leaves you at mere competitive parity. It keeps you in the game, sure, but it exposes you entirely to brutal price wars on commodity trade lanes.
Section 1. The real moat. 3 inimitable assets.
So if physical tanks are essentially a commodity, where does the real differentiation live? Why do industry leaders consistently hold higher margins and retain those demanding multinational chemical clients year after year? To protect profit margins, we have to find the answer in internal capabilities that money alone cannot instantly buy. Let's look at the first asset by contrasting 2 different operational approaches. Imagine a shipper request to load a complex, highly reactive chemical compound. A standard operator goes through the grueling process of consulting public safety data sheets, contacting third-party testing labs, and manually cross-referencing basic UN T-code charts. That process takes days and can still leave lingering safety or contamination risks. But a top-tier operator? They rely on decades of proprietary field experience. They use their own internal data engines to automatically pre-screen complex SDS inputs in mere seconds, confirming cargo-to-tank compatibility without any delay.
The sheer depth of this rare, inimitable data engine is exactly what makes it so powerful. We aren't just talking about a digitized PDF here. We're talking about tracking decades of real-world failures. These top-tier operators have proprietary software databases tracking exactly how specific chemical grades react with various gasket materials like PTFE or EPDM. They know the exact thermal stress corrosion rates on 316L stainless steel. They've got highly specialized cleaning protocols that were developed over years and years of trial and error. A brand new entrant simply cannot copy this overnight. Because it takes decades of field experience to build, this capability easily passes the VRIO test as both rare and inimitable.
Let's move to our second non-replicable asset, owned regional depot infrastructure. You know as well as I do that tanks don't operate in a vacuum. They rely heavily on ground infrastructure to turn around and get back to work. When global ports choke up and ocean schedules slide, leasing more tanks actually just worsens your demurrage costs if those tanks are sitting idle, waiting weeks in third-party backlogs for a wash rack slot. But consider the turnaround time, or TAT velocity cycle. Wash, repair, pressure test, and steam heat. Operators that own and integrate their regional depot networks control this entire cycle. They empower themselves to dictate their own turnaround velocity on demand.
Securing this on-the-ground infrastructure passes the strict VRIO test with flying colors because of the intense barriers to entry. To build this network, you have to secure industrial land permits in highly congested primary port hubs. You need intense environmental licenses for hazardous wastewater treatment plants. You have to deploy immense capital to build out steam heating networks. This requires years, sometimes even decades, of regulatory navigation and specialized development. You literally cannot just write a check and have a fully permitted hazardous materials depot tomorrow. And that makes this physical infrastructure highly limitable.
Our third critical asset shifts from physical infrastructure over to organizational capability, comparing standard tracking against integrated risk analytics. Now, having a tank equipped with basic GPS location, just a dot on a map, is totally standard today. But a fleet embedded with smart telematics provides a completely different value proposition. We're talking about live, sensor-driven hardware that measures internal shell temperatures, minute pressure shifts, and real-time transit disruption risks.
This brilliantly illustrates how that data translates into a real competitive advantage through dynamic intervention. Let's look at a real-world example. Imagine a temperature-sensitive polymer faces a sudden 48-hour road detour. Standard operators would be completely flying blind. But by combining raw telemetry with thermal holding curve software, dispatchers can adjust steam heating plans dynamically, long before the product ever solidifies. Integrating these closed-loop sensor streams directly into daily dispatch workflows prevents multi-thousand-dollar cargo write-offs. The hardware itself might just be a bolt-on, but the organizational capability to ingest and act on that data in real time, that's a true moat. It's highly valuable and incredibly difficult for competitors to replicate.
So let's bring this all together into actionable takeaways for the leadership teams watching. To protect your margins against the constant volatility of global trade, executives and strategic planners must fundamentally stop treating fleet volume as the core of their strategy. Instead, you need to adopt 3 definitive executive mandates. Number 1, stop competing on box count. Number 2, build digital tools that actually leverage your internal operational data. And number 3, invest heavily in non-replicable physical assets, specifically your depot networks and your safety engineering expertise. This is exactly how you transition from spending capital on commodities to investing in true strategic advantages. Ultimately, the steel box just gets you into the room. It is your internal data architectures, your on-the-ground infrastructure, and your specialized operational expertise that actually allow you to win the market. Which leaves us with this vital, provocative final question for your next boardroom meeting. Is your capital expenditure scaling a strategy, or are you just buying more of a commodity? It's a critical distinction that will undoubtedly define the margin leaders of tomorrow. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. I hope this reframes how you look at physical scale, and I'll catch you in the next one.